Good morning. I did get to meet the vice mayor back there, and he saw my name tag and wanted to know if we were long-lost cousins. And I assured him if I got into trouble tonight, we were, and I would call. When I was asked to introduce David C. Forward, I was very honored, but a little perplexed on why they would have me come and introduce such a big speaker. So I started doing a lot of research, got on the internet. I cyber stalked him through Facebook, got on his LinkedIn page. I Googled him, and after reading, I was able to come up with a couple of similarities that paralleled he and myself. So I figured maybe that's why they did that. Now I had to stretch this a little bit, but David is a member of the Medford Sunrise Rotary Club. I'm a member of a Sunrise Rotary Club. David has written 12 books. I have read 12 books. He attended seminary school. I've been to church. And he was highlighted as Man of the Year in an article in the South Jersey Magazine. My last name is Mann. So without taking up any more of his time, let's give him a very big warm welcome, Mr. David C. Forward.
I tell you, I made it. The only concern since I got here is everybody has been saying, Tom Mann is going to introduce you? Oh my gosh. And I woke up at 3:30 this morning in a cold sweat, but we survived. Thank you for inviting me to Cincinnati. Thank you, Karen. Karen and I met just a couple of weeks ago at our Zone Institute in Winnipeg, Canada, and I said to Karen, well, at least down in Cincinnati, unlike Canada, I won't have to give the speech in 2 languages. And she quickly corrected me and she said, well, actually you do, because in our zones we speak English and we speak Southern. And I actually came over from England all those years ago and married a Southern belle from North Carolina, and so we still have communications issues in the Forward home. I don't understand how 2 people can be separated by a common language, and for years I just couldn't. I tried to get into the you all thing, but my wife keeps saying, no, that's not how you do it, hon, it's y'all, right? And then just as I mastered that, I said to her, because I'm a wordsmith, I work with words, I love words, I use words to write and words to speak, and so I said, well, if you refer to me in the singular, y'all, then what would be the plural form of y'all? And she said, well, silly, that would be all y'all. And I can remember going down to North Carolina on the occasion when I decided she was the love of my life and wanted to ask her father for her hand in marriage. We had our 42nd wedding anniversary on Wednesday. And so, you know, most men would say something trite like, well, we're not so much losing a daughter as gaining a son. And that's sort of what I expected, but he turned to my future mother-in-law and said, well, at least he ain't a Yankee. And then there's the music in the South. You know, I'm from England, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and then I moved to New Jersey, and right in my district is the home district of Bono and Springsteen. And then just a few weeks ago, I was driving from Atlanta to Birmingham, Alabama. And every station I turned to in the car had this same music, country music. And I just don't have the talent to write the lyrics that they use in the music that they have down there. I actually pulled over at one point to get some petrol and wrote down some of the lyrics. There was a song called "Take Me Out to the Cornfield, Honey, I'll Kiss You Between the Ears." And I switched the station. There's only so much banjo music you can take. And the next station is, "Sorry I made you cry, honey, but at least your face is cleaner now." And I changed the station again, and there it is. The oil's all in Texas, but the dipsticks are in Alabama. And finally, before I turned it off, the last was that wonderful Southern romantic ballad, "If my nose was running money, I'd blow it all on you." Well, here we are. We are about to celebrate the biggest birthday party the world of Rotary has ever seen. And come next June, there will only be two types of Rotarians. There will be those that went to Atlanta for the best convention in our 112-year history, and there'll be those who wish they had gone, because it will commemorate the time when Rotary International President Arch Klump stood on that stage at the Atlanta Convention in 1917 and shared his vision for an endowment to do good in the world. Arch Klump was a visionary leader. It was he who conceived of the idea to divide Rotary into districts and to have each district led by a person he called the district governor. And for the governor to then call together once a year all the Rotarians in his district to have what he called a district conference. So without Arch Klump's vision, none of us would be here today. The English language that I cherish so much has been cheapened by some words that now have differed from their original meaning. Words like values and truth are bent to suit the intention of the user. And when miracle is used to describe a mayonnaise, some of us believe that's a step too far from the miracles we learned about in Sunday school. But vision is still a word we can clearly understand. And for all the great leaders Rotary has ever had, none has been more of a visionary leader than Arch Klump. Remember, he issued this call in 1917 when we were in the midst of a terrible world war. And while the audience greeted his call for an endowment to do good in the world with polite applause, there was hardly a stampede to support him. Yes, the $26.50 check came in a few days later from the Rotary Club of Kansas City. But Arch Klump went through passive resistance from some Rotary leaders and through 10 years of persistent campaigning before he really saw any substance to what we now know today as our Rotary Foundation. Sure, a few dollars came in here and there, but there was no significant contribution until almost 1930. Mother Teresa once commented how she had been criticized in a newspaper editorial, saying that her work was nothing more than a drop in the ocean. Yes, she said, you're right, but if I did not put the drop in, the ocean would have one drop less. And that brings to mind the personal question. When you or I see something worthwhile, something where there's a great need, something where we can add our drops, would we give up, or would we never give up on pursuing our dreams like Arch Klump showed us. There's an old cliche about the one thing that will appear on every headstone in the graveyard. No matter our faith, no matter our gender, our accomplishments in life, or our wealth, the one thing for sure that will appear on our headstone will be the date we were born, the date we die, and those dates will be separated by the dash. As much as I dislike using cliches, as I grow older, I start to think about what my dash will look like. And it's a little more personal because on the way to the airport yesterday, I had to stop at the memorial service for one of the most enthusiastic Rotarians in our district, a person whom John and Judy and I had dinner with just 8 weeks ago when they came to our district for a fundraiser. And she was struck down at a very young age after a quick battle with polio. And a few weeks before that, one of my club presidents was hit by a drugged-up driver on his way to work at 7:30 in the morning. And you have to wonder if those people had been given the opportunity to talk about the legacy that they wanted to leave in the world, about their dash, if they would not have had the aspiration to make their dash longer. So what will your dash look like? And what will mine look like? And what can each of us do to make that dash a little bit longer? We don't need to travel to Cleveland to see Arch Klump's grave, to know how wide his dash has been. And yet, while we should give enormous credit to Arch Klump for his dogged determination of seeing his Rotary Foundation come to fruition, most of the work of the last 100 years of doing good in the world has not been done by RI presidents or directors or district governors. It's been done by ordinary grassroots Rotarians whose names we'll never know. Unlike university buildings where major donors write big checks so that their names will be put on the library or on the gymnasium, Rotarians have given quietly, have given their time and their talent and their treasures and their service, often in remote and dangerous areas around the globe, in selfless acts of service above self. Rotarians have used our Rotary Foundation and have said, when and where I see despair, let me plant seeds of hope. Where I see illiteracy, let me teach knowledge. Where there is disease, let me bring healing. Where there is conflict, let me be an agent for peace. Rotarians in almost every club in the 1920s had crippled children's activities that were started right in Ohio. And the vision of those unnamed Rotarians from the grassroots led to what we now know as the Easter Seals Society. When the newspapers of the 1930s started spreading the words that there was a growing Nazism in Europe, it was our Rotary Foundation that sponsored seminars all across the country in small towns and big cities to try and generate international understanding and goodwill amongst the members of our communities. And on his deathbed in 1947, Paul Harris instructed that he did not want fancy statues in his name. For memorials of stone will crumble, and statues of brass will tarnish, he said. And so the Rotary Foundation launched Paul Harris Scholarships, which quickly became known as ambassadorial scholarships. In the book, I talked about the famous people, the world influencers that have gone on to be prime ministers and presidents and leading authors and people in the media. We wanted to put the whole list in there, but there are so many of them, there wasn't enough space to put them in the book. When the jet age of the 1960s meant that for the first time that world travel was no longer the domain of the rich and the privileged, our Rotary Foundation again became a force for worldwide understanding between people of different cultures by initiating the Group Study Exchange program. And in the 1970s, when President Clem Renoff wanted to launch a project that would commemorate Rotary's 75th birthday in 1980, he came up with this incredible idea called the Health, Hunger, and Humanity Program, the largest program in the history of Rotary at the time. Again, this caused great consternation amongst some senior Rotary leaders. And again, Clem, just like Arch, stuck with his vision, and after just 2 years of a 3H program to immunize children against polio in the Philippines, after 2 years, the World Health Organization announced that new polio cases there had dropped by 60%. Without Arch Klump's vision, you never would have heard of Clem Renoff. And without Clem Renoff's vision for our Health, Hunger, and Humanity program, we probably would never have heard of Polio Plus. People sometimes criticize us when we make the ask for contributions to our foundation. Each one of you here in the room has probably heard the talking, "Oh, why are you always asking for money? I already gave to the foundation. I became a Paul Harris Fellow when I was club president 14 years ago." I was so privileged to serve as the district chair of the very first campaign for Polio Plus back in the mid-'80s. Walter Maddox was our worldwide leader, and we were each given a district fair share, and were then asked to go around and tell the story, share the vision, and ask each of our clubs to come up with a goal that was above the fair share. I cannot tell you how proud I was when, after that 2 or 3 month period, I went to Walter Maddox and said, "Guess what? Our district in southern New Jersey that had the fair share of $330,000, we have actually come up with a goal of in excess of $1 million. And in my stupid, selfish way, I thought Walter Maddox would slap me on the back and high-five me and give me an attaboy. And instead, he looked me in the eye and he said, "That's great, David, that's great. But never forget, Polio Plus is not about the money. It's about saving children's lives." And in that second, I felt this big. And we did raise over $1 million, and I did show the pictures of the crawlers and all those other things we've all seen for 30 years. But that was just a story. And then I had a business trip to Ethiopia. And while I was there, they said, "You need to take a side trip to this little town of Lalibela." Lalibela is up in the mountains. It's near the border of a conflict zone. You fly into a desert on a little propeller plane, and then a car takes you up these winding switchback roads to Lalibela at the top of a mountain. There are no paved streets in Lalibela. And as soon as my car got there, for the first time, I saw the crawlers. I saw these people on the ground with withered up legs and arms. And the next day when we went to leave, we actually got to see an immunization day. That's not why I was there. But I said to my translator, "Is there a way that I can go see this place where they're making this call to action?" And so we went to the middle of town, and there was a tree, and on the tree was a poster, and it was all written in Amharic, but down at the bottom was the unmistakable logo of Rotary. And there I got to put my first 2 drops in a child's mouth. My son is a runner. And just 2 weeks before that, we had watched him run in the 2-mile race, And it was such a thrill, as some of you have shared, to see him coming up on the last lap in 8th place. And he had a kick on him like a mule. And see him race from 8th place to win the race. And we were proud and we were cheering and the crowd was going crazy. And as my driver went like this and I started going back down the mountain roads, I sat in the back seat of that car and I thought of how that kid would now never be a crawler. Maybe that kid could run a race and have the joy that we just had had. And I cried. And all of a sudden, sitting in the back seat of that car, Walter Maddox's wise advice came back to me. David, Polio Plus is not about the money. It's about saving children's lives. The Rotary Foundation is not about the money. It's about Rotarians in Hong Kong going to Mongolia to do cervical cancer screening for the women in the nomadic tribes. The Rotary Foundation is not about the money. It's about Manuel Hidalgo. Manuel was literally born in a dugout canoe on the Amazon River. And missionaries came to his little village 4 days by canoe from the nearest town that had a road. And they persuaded his parents to let them take him to this village where he could get an education and go to school. And he did so well that he actually went to university in the capital. And that's where Rotary found out about Manuel Hidalgo. And because of your contributions and my contributions to our Rotary Foundation, Manuel became an ambassadorial scholar. This kid born in a dugout canoe on the Amazon River became an ambassadorial scholar to Oxford. And this past year, he was a candidate for the presidency of Peru. The Rotary Foundation is not about the money, it's about saving women in Uganda who've lost their husbands to AIDS and who think the only way to support their family is for themselves to go into the sex trade. But now, because the Rotary Foundation is there, giving them microloans and coaching them in how to set up a business through self-development of people, they're able to have their pride to provide for their families. The Rotary Foundation is not about the money, it's about people like Path Heng, who was tortured as a child by the Khmer Rouge in the killing fields of Cambodia. And after the Khmer Rouge was swept out of office, he too went to university. He too was discovered by Rotarians. And he became a peace scholar in Brisbane, and today is the senior UNICEF officer back in his home country of Cambodia, teaching conflict resolution and peace building. The Rotary Foundation is about Maria Effendi, another Rotary Peace Fellow who now teaches peace and conflict resolution in Pakistan, one of the most dangerous places on earth. How can we put a price on the value of a whole generation of girls who no longer have to stay home for 1 week every month because there's no toilet facilities at their school, but who now can go to school every day of the school year because Rotary Foundation grants have provided clean water and sanitary facilities in their school? How can we put a price on the impact 38,000 ambassadorial scholars from 100 countries like Miguel Hidalgo are making in the world? And like you, I've heard the naysayers, the negative Nellies who argue that the AIDS victim in Kenya is not their problem, or that we should not reach out to refugees because they are of a different religion. I've heard the naysayers in my own district say, we should keep our money right here at home. And then came 9/11, when cars stayed all night in the parking lots of the commuter rail stations in my district because their owners would never come back to claim them. And then came Hurricane Sandy, which obliterated 340,000 homes in New Jersey. And Rotarians across America and from around the world came to us, and they did not say, "These Americans are not our problem." They responded in times of distress and need. Long before President John put the phrase into our vernacular, we have seen that Rotary serves humanity in every corner of the globe. Some say it is senseless for an organization like Rotary to be a positive force for peace in the world. After all, Rotary has no armies, it has no tanks or guns. How can we put a price, though, on cross-cultural understanding and positive influences in areas of conflict that 1,000 Path Hengs and Maria Effendis have had just in the first 10 years of the Rotary Peace Fellows program? How can we not put ourselves in the place of a child who loves his mother every bit as your child loves you, and whom the Rotary Foundation has just saved from cervical cancer? How can we not ascribe the highest investment value in history when we think of loving parents whose 2.2 billion children Rotary has helped save from death and a crippling disability through Polio Plus? The best preachers, the best politicians, the best communicators tell stories. That's why I love telling the story when I meet Rotarians at conferences and pets and meetings like this. As the leaders in your districts, you need to do the same. Learn the stories that make up the very fabric of our foundation, and then share them back in your district. I was preparing my sermon for next week and used as the text Galatians 6:2, which is share one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of the Lord. And it came to me, that's really what President John was saying when he said, Rotary serves humanity. As a little boy growing up in Sussex, in a very rural part of England, we used to go on exploratory trips over the forest, and then when we came home, my friends and I, rather than climb back up over the hills, we would take the easy way and go down the railway line. We would only have 3 or 4 trains a day there, and so this was before electric tracks. And we found, as being boys, we would try to walk and stand and balance on the tracks. And you'd walk 6 or 7 stops and fall off, and another 6 or 7 steps and fall off. And then one day, we realized something amazing. If Clive reached out his left hand and I reached out my right hand, we could each walk on the tracks from there to London and back if we wanted to. We would never fall off the railway line. Isn't that what we do in Rotary? I alone cannot solve poverty, solve diseases, bring clean water and sanitation. But if I reach out and hold your hand, together we can make a real difference. I closed the book, Doing Good in the World, by telling the story of a reporter in Sarajevo, and you remember that dreadful civil war they had in Bosnia. And I told the story of the reporter who, during a particularly awful firefight one day, saw a little girl shot by a sniper. And the man picked up the little girl, and for a moment the reporter said, I need to stop being a reporter and start being a humanitarian. So he threw down his pad and his pencil, and he said to the girl and her father, come with me, my car is right here. And they got into the back seat, and he drove like crazy toward the hospital. And the man in the back seat said, hurry, my friend, my child is still alive. And a couple of minutes later, hurry, my friend, my child is still warm. And then, hurry, my child, my friend, my child is getting cold. And then just a couple of minutes later, hurry! Oh my God, my child has died. And they got to the hospital, and as they both went into the lavatory to wash the blood off their hands and their clothes, the grieving man turned to the reporter and he said, "This is going to be a terrible task for me. I now have to go tell her father that his precious daughter has died." And the reporter was amazed. He said, "I thought she was your child." And the man looked back at the reporter and he said, "No, but aren't they all our children?" To me, that personifies what we do in Rotary through our Rotary Foundation. This is our time of celebration. This is our time to leave a legacy by pledging our treasures, our time, and our talents to our foundation. My friends Mike and Marilyn had no idea how much time they would have left on this earth to leave a legacy, to extend their dash. And neither do you, and neither do I. What I do know is that each one of us needs to join together at this institute on this day and turn this celebration into a renewed pledge to be able to make our dash look so much longer. I'm an old-fashioned bloke, and I still write everything with a fountain pen and then type it in. And so quite literally, with this pen, I wrote this book. But that's not what's important. What's really important is with these hands, you and I have the opportunity to start writing today chapter 1 of version 2 of Rotary's greatest story that was ever told, the next century of doing good in the world. Thank you.